Welcome, everyone. This is the first episode, the inaugural episode of the AKW Podcast. Just want to say thanks for tuning in, man. We're going to be talking football, basketball, maybe some baseball, but really just all that's going on in the sports world. If you got any comments that you want to leave them in the comment section. If you want to see any different content, anything you want to hear talked about, just leave it in the comment section and I'll try to tune into it. But today's episode, as you see on the screen, the title, Why Do Quarterbacks Fail? This is a topic that I've talked about a lot with just other people in the sports world, friends, stuff like that. When you look at the NFL, there's always a revolving door at quarterbacks. Rookie quarterbacks coming in, after 2 or 3 seasons, they're usually shipped out, to their next team or entirely out of the NFL. You've seen even longtime starters, they'll leave from team to team now. Veterans, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, guys who've been in the league a long time, on multiple teams. But really the focus is on the rookie quarterbacks because oftentimes we draft these rookies and we expect them to be the next coming of Joe Montana, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, etc. But in reality, a lot of these guys just aren't what, the hype builds them up to be. Quarterback is the only position where the expectations are a mile wide, but the leeway is probably about as long as a ruler. I mean, you compare a mile to a ruler, those distances are not even comparable, And why is that? Obviously, quarterback is the most important position. You're the field general. You got to go in there and, every Sunday you got to put that ball in your playmaker's hands. You don't want to turn the ball over. You got to get the play call to your teammates. You're expected to be the leader, even if you don't have it in you, you're not that good. You're expected to be that guy, every Sunday. Every Sunday, No other position is at the requirement. No other position does the quarterback or does any other position have to take the blame for everything and give none of the praise. I find that very interesting that Tom Brady can go out there and throw 5 touchdowns. And yeah, I got to thank Randy Moss. Gronk was out there making plays. Edelman was out there doing what he had to do. The defense gave us the opportunity to put up 5 touchdowns. Patrick Mahomes is out there lining up on the scoreboard. He's got to say, yeah, Kelsey was in the right position. Pacheco we were able to run the ball effectively. The coaches called a good game, But when Zach Wilson goes out there and throws 3 interceptions in prime time, I wasn't out there. I got to throw the ball better. I'm just not seeing the field. He can't say, oh, it's a we problem. He can't say, oh, the defense wasn't doing what they had to do. He can't say the receivers were dropping the ball. He can't say the coaches were calling stupid plays. He's got to go up to the camera in the media and say, look, man, it's all on me. I play like garbage. And we all know he played like garbage. So if he says he didn't play like garbage, well, that's a bad look in the locker room. The media is going to kill these guys, for how bad they play, He's going to see it on his phone, social media. Teammates are going to start to hate him. I remember that game against the Jaguars before they brought in Aaron Rodgers last season. I mean, they literally booed him off the field. Thursday night football match up, and the Jets were in that game the entire time, but they just couldn't get any decent quarterback play. As a Steelers fan, since the departure of Big Ben, I've kind of seen what not having good quarterback play can do to a team, to a franchise, really to an entire city. I mean, we brought in Mitch Trubisky, and after 3 weeks, Kenny was the starter. Then we give Kenny the first season to play. It's a rookie season, so we're going to give him some leeway. But that second season came, and look, man, a lot of people were pointing the blame at everyone else except Kenny. They were saying Matt Canada is the issue, which Canada had his, he was a part of it. You had guys, maybe the O-line wasn't playing well. You couldn't get the run game going. That's a part of it. But ultimately, the underlying factor was horrible quarterback play, and the quarterback, as well as taking the blame and giving out all the praise, the quarterback is, his job is to elevate the talent around him. What makes the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl run last year so great is that the offense, it wasn't a pretty picture throughout most of the season. Their defense was pretty amazing, but the offense itself really wasn't that great, which is why when the playoffs came around, I was like, okay, Miami, we'll see what they can do. They didn't get it done. All right, Buffalo, you're on the road at Buffalo. Buffalo, you finally had that home field advantage. You wanted the rematch. They changed the overtime rules for you. Couldn't get it done. Baltimore, all right. Lamar's your MVP. You're at home. This is your year, they're saying. You got the best defense in the league, or top 3 defense, right? And they lose. And that was a defensive matchup that game, so, But ultimately, the quarterback's job, he has to elevate the talent around him. What makes Tom Brady so great is that he didn't always really have the best weapons. Yes, he had Gronk, and he had Randy Moss for a period, but overall, Tom Brady has had pretty average wide receiver talent, in my opinion. Now, I know they had the ultimate Tampa Bay season where they had all the All-Stars, Antonio Brown, they had Gronk, they had Mike Evans, but other than that, Gronk's been his primary weapon. He's had Edelman, but no, Edelman's not an elite wide receiver talent. Not the likes of Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, Megatron, some of the guys that Tom Brady didn't get to play with. He didn't really have those type of weapons that much during his career. Even Mahomes last year, his main weapon is Kelsey, and other than that, he's got Marquez Valdez-Scantling, McCole Hardman. These aren't really guys who are your top 10, top 15, top 20 receivers. He had Tyreek Hill, but they got 2 Super Bowls without Tyreek Hill. He elevated that talent around him. But ultimately, when you don't see these things from your rookie quarterbacks, when you don't see them elevating the talent, when they, just can't get it done, these GMs are quick to just throw them out, or the ownership is quick to say, all right, we'll get a new one the next year, and that brings me up to my first overall topic of why we see quarterbacks fail, and that has to do with the situation. Now on the screen, I have, Zach Wilson, Kenny Pickett, and Trey Lance. Now, if we had to rate these quarterbacks in terms of pure physical talent, based off what all the draft evaluations were saying when it was their time, I think the ranking would go 1, Trey Lance, 2, Zach Wilson, and 3, Kenny Pickett. Now, I know Trey and Zach were in the same draft class, but I think Trey has the much more evident physical gifts than Zach Wilson. And then, of course, Kenny Pickett. And Zach was the number 2 pick in the 2021 draft with Trevor Lawrence, with Trey Lance, with Mac Jones, and Justin Fields, of course. Trey Lance was the number 3 overall pick in that draft. And then Kenny, he was the number 20 pick in his class, but he was the first quarterback taken off the board. So these are all first-round quarterbacks. One went to the Jets, one went to the Steelers, and the other the San Francisco 49ers. Now, looking at the situation of all 3 of these guys, I think we can all agree Zach Wilson probably had the worst situation. The Jets have never really been a formidable franchise in my entire life. And I don't even think the time they really had, they didn't have a Garrett Wilson, I don't believe, his rookie year. I think Garrett came the second year, if I'm correct. They didn't have a Sauce Gardner, his rookie year. They didn't have some of the pieces they have now. I'm sure the O-line was terrible. I'm sure the run game was non-existent. Just thinking about the top of my head. They also had a rookie head coach in Robert Saleh. So, and again, he's going to the Jets, a team that really hasn't been anything other than, maybe 1 or 2 AFC championship appearances in the Rex Ryan era. So when you look at the situation, if you're a rookie quarterback, you really want to be playing for the Jets now, would you? People will criticize Deion Sanders for saying that Shador, he's only going to go to X amount of organizations. Some of them, he said, were the Raiders, the Falcons, and the Giants. Now, those are 3 different organizations, but if Deion is saying, hey, these are the only teams I approve my son going to. You can't be mad at him. You see what happens when your son can go to a New York Jets, or even a Chicago Bears with Justin Fields, just two terrible organizations. It might not work out, So when you put these quarterbacks in these situations where they don't have a lot of talent around them, or you have a rookie head coach, or they were the second or worst team in the NFL, a 2-15 team, a 1-16 team, you're putting a rookie quarterback in that situation to completely change the narrative, to completely change everything going on in probably the last 5-10 years. The Jets haven't been anything since Mark Sanchez. That's over 10 years ago by the time Zach Wilson comes. So he's not really, you're already setting him up for failure. And the question was, why do quarterbacks fail? Well, half the time you're already setting them up for failure. Compare that to a guy like Trey Lance, though. Very different situation. The Niners were already in a Super Bowl not too long before he was drafted. He's got a great coach in Kyle Shanahan. He's got weapons around him. He's got, on paper, all the tools that you would think would help a quarterback succeed in the NFL. I think that the situation with Trey Lance was very different, though. This is a guy who doesn't even have that much football experience. I think he only played one full season in college. And then the COVID year happened. I think they played 2 games or maybe 0 games. And he ends up as a number 3 overall pick? Just let that sink into you. This guy really only has one full experience of college football. And this is at the FCS level. Not at the FBS. Not at a Georgia, an LSU, Ohio State. This guy has one real season of film at North Dakota State University. Not to discredit North Dakota State University, but I think that should kind of show you that, hey, maybe this guy isn't a top 5 pick. Maybe he's got some talent, but, he's coming from North Dakota State. He doesn't have a lot of film to show. He also hasn't played football in a while since the COVID year happened. So now we want him to come into Kyle Shanahan offense, learn the system, and be the starter, Now, of course, Brock Purdy goes in and, he can show you that it can be ran. The system can be ran to perfection. They get to the Super Bowl in Brock Purdy's second season, But I think if you look at Purdy, he has a history of starts in college football at Iowa, or I think Iowa State. So, and then when you have a full season to sort of just sit back and, or maybe not a full season, but when you can watch the failures of other quarterbacks, it's easier to learn what not to do. I think about Kenny Pickett. It took a while for Kenny to really develop in college at Pitt. I think he played there 5 seasons, and it was the 5th season where he finally figured it out. The 5th season where he finally became a Heisman finalist, finally was going to be deemed as an NFL draft pick. He won the first round. He threw 40 touchdowns at Pitt. They won the ACC. So for him, having that long-term experience helped him. And he goes to an organization like Pittsburgh where, okay, they've only had 3 head coaches. Mike Tomlin, Bill Cowher, and Chuck Noll. They've won 6 Super Bowls, right? They've been to 9 of them. Won 6 and been to 9 of them. 3 coaches. They have had some of the most prestigious, players play for their organization. The culture is really different. It's a family-owned organization. And I think a lot of times that can help, especially when you have a guy like Art Rooney who has sat behind his father, who sat behind, his father. And they can just see how the organization should be ran. He goes to Pittsburgh and it's a pretty decent situation. He's got weapons. They surrounded with Deontay Johnson. They got Najee Harris, Pat Freiermuth, some young guys. You've got a formidable defense. TJ Watt, Cameron Hayward, Alex Highsmith. So they surrounded Kenny on paper with talent. But of course, when you have a guy like Matt Canada, an offensive coordinator, a guy who has had 0 NFL experience, a guy who didn't really have the greatest tenure in college, a guy who in Big Ben's last season had Big Ben rolling out, at 40 years old, out of shape Big Ben, having guys run jet sweeps every other play. You're really not giving him a coordinator who knows what he's doing. A lot of times when you would watch Matt Canada call plays, sometimes we'd run. It would be run on first, throw on second, or throw on third, or you just knew what was coming. You passed on first, you ran on second. Well, now you got to pass, right? It was just so predictable. Run, pass, run. No real fluidity. So as a quarterback, you're only as good as your coaches make you out to be sometimes. If your coaches aren't dialing up a good game plan, or they're dialing up a good game plan and you guys aren't executing, how successful can you be? How successful can you be when you don't really run any advanced routes? Your routes are just speed outs, zigs, maybe a quick slant, You're not really testing the defense, When your O-line isn't really gelling together and you have no run game, well, now the defenses know when you have to pass because you can't run the ball, they know it's a pass, But when you equate that also, with the lack of talent sometimes, well, you're really putting everyone in a bad situation. You got a bad coordinator, your quarterback might not be that talented, and you're not executing, But I think the second point I wanted to make was that of the veteran presence, which I think is severely underrated. A lot of these quarterbacks are just thrown in and they're expected to completely learn how to run an NFL offense, which is completely different from a college offense. NFL game is much faster. The field is shorter, or not shorter, but you have more room to spread out your offense in college. The sticks are a lot closer together in the NFL. You got the crowd roaring down on you. A lot more pressure. It's the NFL, man. You expect some guy who might have just learned to master his own college offense to then come in and master your NFL offense? Most times than not, that's not going to happen. He's not going to be able to perfect the offense immediately. Even the best quarterbacks who've had some of the best rookie seasons, they probably weren't executing the offense to, what their peak was. Peyton Manning set the interception, the rookie interception record his first season, So, and he's, one of the best quarterbacks ever. So it might not always work out to what you expect it to be. Trevor Lawrence had a horrible rookie season. Now, when you look at what he was surrounded with, not much talent, bad head coaching and Urban Meyer, and just dysfunctional franchise in the Jacksonville Jaguars. Okay, now we can start to see why he might not have had that great first season. His second season, he comes in and wins a playoff game. His third season, a little bit banged up, but he still shows you that, hey, I have this talent. Let's see what he can do in this fourth season. Compare that to a guy like Zach Wilson, who just went one pick after him. Also has a rookie head coach. Not much talent. They don't give him that veteran presence to sort of say, hey, Zach, this is how you do it. Or, hey, Zach, watch me do it. And then you come out and do it. I think looking now at this current draft class, you got Caleb Williams going number 1, Jaden going 2, and Drake going 3. And out of all these guys, if you had to ask me who has the best situation on paper, I would probably say Caleb Williams, just with the amount of talent that he has, right? Now, of course, it doesn't mean he's going to be the best quarterback in the class, right? Statistics show that most of these quarterbacks aren't going to work out. Maybe 2 of them get a second contract. Maybe 3 of them are still in the league, by the time their rookie contract's in. Some of them will probably be backup quarterbacks, right? Maybe they all work out, but history shows that is not the case. And there were, 6 quarterbacks taken in the first round? Caleb, Jaden, Drake, JJ, Michael Penix, and Bo Nix. You could probably just flip a coin heads or tails to see which one of those will be in the NFL 10 plus years as a starter. And there's nothing wrong with being a backup quarterback. Backup quarterbacks make a lot of money. backup quarterback, I mean, your job is to go in there, watch film, help the quarterback, and you can sit and just relax and see what he does. If your time is needed to go play on that field, then your time is needed. But you can make a lot of money as a backup quarterback, and I'm sure a lot of these guys will. But if you had to, at that top three, Caleb, Jaden, Drake, if you had to ask me who's got the best situation, I'm going to say it's Caleb. He's got a DJ Moore, right? He's got a Keenan Allen. They just drafted Odunze. They've been revamping the defense, right? So on paper, he's got weapons. They got DeAndre Swift for the run game. I think they got DeAndre. I think so. The Bears offense should look pretty decent. You compare that to a guy like Bryce Young, where his number one weapon was Adam Thielen. No disrespect to Adam Thielen, but Adam is not a wide receiver one, which is why they drafted Xavier Legette, which is why they traded for Deontay Johnson. If you look at how the Panthers really assembled this draft, it was early on, at least when I was watching, they got a lot of offensive weapons for their young quarterback, So year two, okay, Bryce, we've given you this amount of guys. Can you show me? We've improved your situation. Can you show me that you are worth the number one pick we spent on you last season? Right. And of course, Caleb goes to the Bears after the whole Justin Fields fiasco. It's just so funny to me how they treated Justin compared to Fields. And a lot of people say, well, the rebuild wasn't for Justin, it was for Caleb. Which, if you look at it, it looks that way. I asked someone on Twitter, would the Bears have would they have traded Justin if they had the number 2 pick from Carolina? And he said no. And I think that's very interesting because then what do? Do you trade back? Do you draft a Marvin Harrison? Just things to think about. But comparing Caleb to Jaden Daniels, who might be going to the worst franchise I've ever seen in the modern era, the Washington Commanders. He's got some offensive weapons around him, but Washington was terrible this year. Or last year. I mean, they were terrible. They've been terrible since Kirk Cousins departed. Since the RG3 days. So I know he's got Terry McLaurin, he's got Dotson, but it's Washington. It's not like it's the Bears where they've shown you, hey, we know how to. The Bears have done a good job with this rebuild. On paper at least. Now next season they were 7-10 last year. Can they get to an 8-9? Can they get to a 9-8? Can they fight for a wild card spot? We'll see. They've anointed Caleb as the chosen one, so we'll see. But looking at the Commanders, I mean, I don't know. I can see why Jaden Daniels wouldn't want to play there. Why he preferred the Raiders. I know Antonio Pierce was his old coach at Arizona State, but I'd much rather play in Las Vegas than at FedEx Field or whatever they call it these days. Washington has not been good to quarterbacks over the history. RG3, Alex Smith tore up his leg on that field. I think something about that field is just bad vibes. Right? So we're going to expect Jaden to go in there and be the starter and completely revamp this team. Now, I do think out of the three, Jaden does have the best head coach in Dan Quinn. This is a guy who's been to a Super Bowl. He's been a part of great defenses. He had his stint with the Cowboys as their defensive coordinator. And he really took their defense to a level that we were talking like the Cowboys had a top 10 defense, top 5 defense. Now, last year it didn't work out that way. They lost Trayvon Diggs, of course, but the season before, I mean, Cowboys were looking amazing, Now they had that debacle in the NFC divisional game against the Packers. So, I really don't know what was going on there, but Jaden's got a good coach, and if he can do anything like he did in Atlanta, Dan Quinn with Washington, Jaden could really revamp that city, revamp that franchise. But I think Caleb has the head-to-head advantage. They've already built the team for Caleb. If Caleb can do anything that Justin Fields did, and he can take that an ounce better, then, Chicago fans should be happy. And then when you go to Drake, he might have the worst situation. New England just drafted a quarterback, Mac Jones, 3 years ago, and he's already gone. And now Drake comes in, and out of the three, Drake is probably the most raw talent. You know, I always had Drake as my number 2 before last college football season started, behind Caleb. Jaden had a great season, so Jaden was my 2. Drake was my 3. But when you look at Drake, I mean, this guy has all the physical gifts. I mean, if you're building a quarterback in a lab, you're building him like Drake may. You know, he resembles a Josh Allen. He resembles a Justin Herbert. You know, he resembles a Big Ben. You know, so what do these guys all have in common? You're 6'4", 6'5", 230, 40. You know, they can sling that rock 70 yards with ease of effort. You know. But when you look at the Patriots, I mean, it's a similar story to what Zach Wilson went through. You know, rookie head coach, not a lot of talent. You know, they've got some decent pieces on defense, but the Patriots really have not been anything since Tom Brady has left. You know, and you've got a new head coach, Gerard Mayo. As much as he can be anointed within the Patriots, you know, Hall of Honor, Hall of Fame, whatever you want to call it, he's a rookie head coach, and he's going to be doing all these things for the first time. Now, the good thing about Drake's situation is that they brought in Jacoby Brissett, you know, a good backup quarterback. Like I said, it pays to be a backup. Jacoby's been everywhere. He's been Indianapolis, Cleveland, Washington. You know, now he's out there in New England, right? Jacoby's been around the block, so if there's anyone who can teach Drake how to play quarterback in the NFL, I think it's going to be Jacoby, you know. And Jacoby's probably going to be the starter. And if Gerard Mayo is making that decision, or if they've already have it in their mind, yes, you're going to start, you know, that's a great opportunity for a guy like Drake May, especially a guy like Drake May who comes from a school like North Carolina where he doesn't have, you know, as much NFL talent compared to, you know, the other guys who go to really predominantly football schools. You know, it's a bit different playing in a UNC versus Ohio State. You know, it's a bit different playing in a UNC versus a Georgia, you know, football-wise. So for him to be able to just come into New England and sit, just get accustomed to the team, get accustomed to his, you know, his teammates, the city, the playbook, you know, even ownership, because Robert Kraft is probably going to have a lot of expectations on this guy. You know, he just drafted Mac Jones, right? He's coming from Tom Brady to Mac Jones, right? And they anointed Mac Jones as the next guy, you know. Mac Jones wanted to be a Patriot, you know, so now he's out in Jacksonville behind Trevor. But Drake, now you're the guy. So why don't we just let you sit back and watch, you know? There's a lot of things you have to clean up with your game itself, so why are we going to throw you out there just for you to get killed by NFL defenses and have your confidence shrunk to what Zach Wilson's confidence was, shrunk to what Kenny Pickett's confidence was? Instead, we can just let you watch. If Jacoby messes up, it's no big deal. Jacoby knows, hey, you're not the guy long term. And he's okay with that, right? So you can watch and develop, and when your time comes, you'll be ready. I mean, the best quarterback of this generation, Patrick Mahomes, sat behind Alex Smith for a full season, you know. Tom Brady got to sit behind Drew Bledsoe and watch. So it's beneficial, right? When you look at the next 3 quarterbacks, who goes next? J.J. McCarthy. In terms of situation, I mean, this guy has Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, right? T.J. Hawkinson. He's got a head coach who is offensive-minded, you know, Kevin O'Connell. He's in a dome. Doesn't have to worry about the weather, right? And it looks like he's probably going to be the starter. I know they brought in Sam Darnold, but I think JJ is going to be the starter, you know. Now, the defense and the run game are 2 things I'm going to be concerned about because Minnesota hasn't had the best defense. I know they had Danielle Hunter, but I think that secondary needs to get cleaned up. They might have did some things in the draft. I got to check. And the run game, they got rid of Dalvin Cook, and, maybe you should have kept him, honestly. I don't know. But JJ, talent-wise, to me, I don't think JJ's all that. And I'm not an NFL quarterback, so who am I to talk? But comparing him to the other guys, I think they've got a little bit more talent than him. And I think JJ, he fell to the perfect spot. I mean, people had this guy going top 3, top 5. I'm like, top 5? Over Penix? No way. But JJ's got the best receiver in the NFL. He's got Addison, who, if you know me, you know I was hyping up Jordan Addison. I said, okay, I see what they're doing. Addison's going to cook because he's got Jefferson on the other side, right? They had Randy Moss, and then they had Chris Marshall. That might not be his name. Let me see. Let me look it up. Randy Moss and Chris. I don't think his last name is Chris Carter. I don't know why I said Marshall. They had Randy Moss and Chris Carter. All right. Juju Smith-Schuster had Antonio Brown, right? Odunze, he's got DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. All the eyes are going to be on those two. So Odunze's probably going to cook. He might be a 1,000-yard receiver. So JJ's got a good situation, I think. He's got a good head coach. The organization has already built this team for him. All he has to do is go execute. If he can execute, well then, Minnesota might win the division. Or be competing for it at least. If JJ can live up to the hype at least. That's what he has to do. JJ has to show you guys why they took me number 10. Some guys who got drafted last year even, the guy in Tennessee, man. What's his name? Will Levis. I mean, on paper, right, this guy had DeAndre Hopkins, who showed you he can still do it, He had a Derrick Henry. Now they've casted off Derrick Henry, but when you look at what they have now, they've got Derrick Henry still. They just got Calvin Ridley. They just got L'Jarius Sneed on the defense, right? They've got Tony Pollard, right? Do they still have Tajay Spears? I think he's on the Titans. Titans have revamped this team. They got a new head coach, though. Rookie head coach, but second-year quarterback, right? He's already done it. And Will Levis looked pretty good in the short amount of games he played or the short amount of film they have on him, right? And he's got arm talent. He's got arm talent. And he can run the ball. A lot of people's comp for him was Josh Allen. So I think he's got a pretty good situation. Going down the draft for this year, you got Michael Penix, who might have the best situation. Because Penix, a lot of people were like, why did the Falcons take this guy, right? The Falcons took him because he was their number 1 quarterback. And he might have been their number 1 player. I thought they were going to go Dallas Turner because he was right there. Falcons defense has been pretty piss poor the last few years. And, one of my friends, he's a big Falcons fan. He was like, man, we need a pass rusher. And they didn't take one. A lot of Falcons fans were confused by the pick, but you just gave Kirk Cousins, a 36-year-old quarterback, $180 million, $100 guaranteed, off an Achilles. That can go any second. And Penix, to me, he was my 4 in this class. He was my 4. And what better situation for him than to sit behind Kirk Cousins, a guy who's been in the league, Kirk's had to be in the league 10 years now, right? A guy who knows how to run an NFL offense, knows what it means to be a quarterback, right? He's got the big-time payments multiple times. Kirk's been successful, even if he hasn't won, that many playoff games. Been to the Super Bowl, been to the NFC Championship, whatever you want to call him, primetime Kirk. He never shows up under the lights, whatever you want to call him. Man, Kirk Cousins has done well for himself in this league, And the Falcons haven't really had that veteran quarterback presence to that level since Matt Ryan was there, right? So now you bring in Michael Penix. He can sit behind Kirk. And Michael's young, Your offense is young. So Kirk can kind of show the guys, okay, we got a Kyle Pitts. We got a Bijan Robinson. We have a Drake London. I'm going to show you guys how we can really be a great offense. I'm going to show you I can make a Drake London turn into a Justin Jefferson. Not saying that's going to happen, but that's just got to be the mindset. Bijan Robinson is this elite talent that we're saying. So they gave him the number 7. That's Mike Vick's number. They believe in him. You got Kyle Pitts. You spent the number 4 pick on a tight end. So now you got this veteran quarterback who can kind of show you guys, hey, this is how we can be a successful NFL team. Michael can just sit back and watch that happen, right? Worst case scenario, Kirk Cousins balls out, retires at 40, and now you have Penix who can play for, you can franchise tag him or whatever in case you don't want to pay him the big time bucks. Get that 5th-year option and see what he's made of. But, Penix has all the arm talent in the world to me. He throws a prettier spiral than probably most of the NFL quarterbacks, man. And the accuracy is crazy. Him and JJ have some. Him, JJ, and Bo Nix, they got some great accuracy, man. But I think Penix really has the best situation because he's going to have the longer leash. He doesn't have to worry about this season. He might not even have to worry about next season, which is totally fine. You can always manipulate the cap. A lot of guys were like worried, okay, we just gave this guy Kirk all this money. You can always find a way to manipulate the money, man. Look at the Saints. They've been in cap hell for what, 2, 3, 4 years now, and it just doesn't seem like it matters to them, right? They always find a way to have good guys on their roster, And then to our last quarterback, Bo Nix, who, situation-wise, I don't really know what Denver's doing, I think Denver, man, the Russ situation didn't work out, for better or for worse. The Nathaniel Hackett season was horrible to watch. But Russ was kind of cooking this year. I think Sean Payton really threw him under the bus. There's not really much talent in Denver. So, again, it's all about situation. Are you putting your quarterbacks in the situation to be successful? Half the time you look at these rosters, you can just say no. And then you're going to be so surprised when you go 7-10 or whatever. The Broncos were in playoff contention. But what's his name just decides to not play him. He plays Jarrett Stidham, or maybe not Jarrett Stidham, I don't know. Some backup. It might have been Jarrett. But the Broncos, you got Cortland Sutton. You just gave him $80 million a couple years ago. You just traded Judy. Your defense, you got PS2. Do they still have Justin Simmons? So they've got some pieces on defense, at least in the secondary. But offensively, Bo, what does he really have around him? They just drafted Troy Franklin, so maybe that's going to be a nice wide receiver 2 option for now. But situation-wise, the only thing I can really give Bo Nix is that he has Sean Payton. But if Sean Payton, Russ was cooking, like I said. I think he had 29 touchdowns last year. And people think he's washed? If the Steelers could only get, 6 touchdowns from Kenny Pickett, and people are saying, oh, you're getting Russ. Russ is washed. But Russ threw 29 touchdowns and sub-10 interceptions. If that's what he's doing in Denver, imagine what he can do for us this season. With actual weapons, a coach who embraces you, And Denver, since Peyton Manning has, retired, hasn't been anything. So I think for Bo, look, man, you got Sean Payton. If Sean Payton can get the best out of Drew Brees, maybe he can get the best out of you. But again, Drew Brees was cooking before he was even a New Orleans Saint. That injury was what kind of hurt him. But Drew was pretty okay in San Diego. So I wonder. But we're about to hit the 40-minute mark, man. I've been talking a long time. I just think these NFL teams, man, they just throw quarterbacks out to the garbage after a season or two, and a lot of them do it over again. The Jets had Zach Wilson, they had Sam Darnold before. Who was it? They had Geno Smith even. The Bears, Mitch Trubisky, Justin Fields, and now Caleb Williams. Third time's the charm? I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if Caleb wasn't that good. Not to just talk about him, but look how many quarterbacks just fan out. You know? I'm trying to think of some other teams, man, but I think y'all get the point, you know? And I think, just kind of thinking towards next year, who are some of the primetime quarterbacks? You know, Shedeur Sanders is going to go top 5. I guarantee it. You don't think the New York Giants will not want a Sanders throwing quarterback to Malik Neighbors and Jalen Hyatt and Darren Waller? I mean, you see what happens when Sanders, that last name, is a part of your organization. Look at Colorado, right? I was watching every Colorado game. I'm sure you were too, right? You don't think even the Raiders, you know, I know they have Aiden O'Connell, who I like. They got Gardner Minshew. But you don't think they wouldn't want Shedeur Sanders throwing footballs to Devontae Adams? Handing it off to Josh Jacobs? Brock Bowers? Right? You got Carson Beck out of Georgia. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of teams looking at him this season. You got Quinn Ewers out of Texas. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of teams who didn't take a quarterback this year with that in mind, that these 3 guys are going to be there. Dylan Gabriel out of Oregon, you know. Even Jalen Milroe, who I think, if he can figure out how to throw the ball, he looks a lot like Lamar Jackson. And now he's got a head coach in Kalen DeBoer, who turned Michael Penix into a top 10 draft pick. Just food for thought. Anyways, man, I appreciate y'all for listening. Like I said, comment down below what you want to see. Hit that like button, subscribe, share, all that good stuff, man. And yeah, man. Peace out.